Once upon a time, in the village of Umudede, a little village in the eastern part of Africa, there lived a king who had no heir to the throne or even a child of his own. The king sat outside his hut one evening with his hands on his chin, thinking about who would take care of his kingdom if he passed on. Rumors had circulated around the village that the king had used his wife's womb to secure the throne of Umudede, as he himself was not the rightful heir to the throne.
Thank you all for your wonderful comments in our previous video. We highly appreciate you and do not take your support for granted. Special shout out to Faith and Jimmy. Thank you for your engaging comments. Now go to the story.
Abina, he called to his wife, who was sleeping in her chamber while he was outside contemplating what to do about his wife's barrenness. Although he kept calling and she couldn't hear him, he had to send one of the guards with him to fetch the queen. She emerged shortly and rubbed her eyes, yawning. It was obvious she hadn't slept enough. "My king, here I am. You sent for me," she said groggily. The king asked her to sit down and then he began. "Rumors have been spreading throughout this kingdom that I used my unborn children as sacrifices to secure the throne of Umudede. This has troubled me deeply and I am growing old. I want to hear the cry of a baby in this palace and have an heir to my throne," he said, stroking his beard. The queen was silent for a moment. Even though the news hadn't reached her yet, she was saddened by her barren state. "My king, I understand how you feel. I also long to hear the cry of a baby. Is there nothing we can do?" she asked, tears already welling up. "First thing tomorrow morning, before the cock crows, we will journey together to the neighboring village to find a solution. I heard they have the best native doctors," he said. "As you wish, my king." The queen bowed and left for her chambers to sleep. The king sat outside for a while. Then he also went into his chambers to sleep. The queen couldn't sleep as she kept imagining the solution to her problem. She wanted to be the one waking her husband to set out on the journey to the neighboring village in search of a solution, taking one of the guards with them. Early in the morning, before the cock crowed, the queen had already prepared herself. She went straight to the king, woke him up, and they both prepared. Without taking anyone else, they disguised themselves as villagers and left the village for the neighboring village. They journeyed for 2 days, passing through the forest and crossing streams before finally reaching the village. When they arrived at the kingdom of Kasumba, the sacred place of the gods, the birthplace of Ikenga, one of the ancient gods, they still disguised themselves as villagers to avoid being detected. With the help of one of the guards they worked with, they found out where the native doctor stayed. They waited until night, then visited the native doctor. Before they could enter the hut, a voice thundered outside, "King Chipupa, welcome to Kasumba," causing the queen to tremble. The native doctor appeared behind them. He called the king by another name, King Adzo, and when he turned, he almost stuttered. But that wasn't acceptable as a king, although the queen shivered in fear. "You came to seek the solution to your problem," the voice said, while the king nodded in approval. The native doctor asked them to sit, but before sitting, the king knew what to do, which was putting money in the bowl meant for the gods. "You will not be able to have an heir to your throne, but the gods will give you 3 children, and all of them will be girls. You will need to marry them off when they are ripe, and one of them will give birth to a male child." Although the king was sad, he knew the gods were wise, and everything that came from there was good. The queen was given something from the calabash to drink. "Go, your problem is solved," the man finally said as they both left with mixed feelings, whether to be happy that their prayers were answered or to be sad. They went back to the village just in time to debunk the rumor that the king had run away because his wife could not give him an heir. Months passed and the queen's stomach started growing, and the villagers started noticing it themselves. The rumor spread that the queen was finally pregnant, but this time it was no longer a rumor. The queen was also excited to walk around the village so everyone could notice she was pregnant, although she was not happy that it was not going to be a boy. Months passed again and she was due for delivery. As the queen, the midwife had to come to the palace and help her deliver the baby. The first baby came out. It was a girl. Shortly after, the second and third came out also, all girls, just as the native doctor had said. Although the king was not happy when he was told, he had to do what the native doctor had commanded, waiting for them to come of age and then giving them out for marriage in order to retain his kingdom. So he had no choice but to accept the children. Together, he and his queen trained the children, and despite the rumor still flying around that the queen still could not provide an heir, the villagers began to accept the children bit by bit until they could no longer say anything about the princesses who had grown so beautiful that suitors started trooping in to ask for the princesses' hands in marriage. The king wanted all his daughters to marry princes, and that was the reason he rudely declined the suitors who wanted to marry his daughter. One of his daughters, by the name of Ashanti, who was the eldest, spent all her time eating, which made her too fat and ugly. Even when the king scolded her countless times, she still did not want to listen. She kept eating at the point of having many meals a day. The king even has to call a meeting in his household to address the issue. But Princess Ashanti turned a deaf ear to her father's orders. Her father was disappointed in her and made sure she stayed inside the house so she wouldn't chase her sister's suitors or bring shame to him. She was not allowed to go out like the other princesses, but she didn't mind. Instead, she continued to spend her time eating, trying to forget her problems by overeating. In the kingdom, it was a law that if the eldest child remained unmarried, the rest would also stay single. This situation was a problem for the other princesses and the king because he didn't know how to get his daughter to get married. All the suitors rejected her and even made fun of her, calling her a pig and elephant. However, no one dared to say it to her face to avoid the king's anger. It was a matter of concern because if the princesses didn't get married, there would be no heir and the kingship would have to pass to another household. This really made the king worried because the kingship was passed on to him by his father, and it would be a thing of shame for it to leave his household. It would look as if he is not brave enough or capable of commanding respect in his own household. Every night, he sat outside the hut thinking about what to do about his daughter's situation. Then an idea came. He knew exactly what to do. In the morning, even without calling his advisor for counsel, he ordered the town crier to announce to the whole village that he would give out lands, cows, and even half of his kingdom to anyone who would agree to marry his daughters. It was a plan he made by himself, and when the day came, many suitors came from far and near because they had it in mind to get married to one of the beautiful princesses. Soon, the news circulated that even princes from other kingdoms came to grace the occasion. Although the offer was too good to be true, they still went to find out for themselves. Some did not come for the princesses, but for the huge offers the king had placed on the head of his princesses. They wanted riches for themselves, especially the poor ones, and they did not even care a bit about the princesses. When it was time for the king to speak, he started, "My people, I greet you. Thank you so much for honoring my invitation, but it is quite unfortunate that you will have to marry one of my daughters at a time. Hearing this, some of the suitors began to murmur some words to themselves as he continued, I am giving out only one of my daughters here in marriage, which is Ashanti, my eldest daughter. As tradition demands, she needs to get married before her sisters. Like I have said, I will be giving out lands, cows, and even half of my kingdom to anyone who marries my daughter Ashanti. He said as the princess revealed herself, causing a lot of suitors to despair as they cursed the king, although not to his hearing. Not a single person was left. They went home one after the other, leaving the king and his family in the village square. It was an embarrassing thing that the king bowed his head in shame. Some of the princes came with their fathers, and one of the fathers even scolded the king for insulting them that way. Did we tell you we came all the way here to ask your ugly daughter's hand in marriage? Or is it that we don't have anything else to do? He screamed at the top of his voice, while the other kings supported him and even hailed him for his bravery to stand up to the king. The king was forced to get up and speak to his daughter Ashanti. Imagine the shame you have brought to me because of your eating habits. The fierce lion has become a cub today because of you. I am very much ashamed of you and will not hesitate to give you away, even to a cripple if he luckily comes asking for your hand in marriage. He didn't finish what he was saying because he was really heartbroken that even his greatest plan did not work out. Nobody could accept to marry his daughter, even with all the promises he had made to the suitors. It meant it was no longer about the money. Nothing else could be done in the king's sight. The other princesses started protesting that they were getting old, and their elder sister was chasing their suitors away. They might grow old without getting married. All this really disturbed the king, and he kept praying to the gods to make a way. Meanwhile, he had ordered the princess to be locked up and fed once a day so that she would reduce and become slim like her sister. He said to one of the guards, make sure you lock her up in her room. She is not allowed to go anywhere or talk to anyone until I see an improvement. I am no longer going to tolerate and accommodate the constant shame she keeps bringing to me and the rest of the family. The guards did what he commanded and locked her in her room. The king was not happy about what he did. He cried at night when everyone was asleep. It was just the only way he could secure the throne. Ashanti, on the other hand, started noticing she was not becoming any younger and needed to do something about her situation. In order to help herself and her father, she had to move out from her father's house to her husband's house. She saw him one night on the balcony crying while he was just walking around the palace, exercising to see if she could slim down. Even though he did not notice, someone had seen him. Princess Ashanti was sad that it was because of her it happened. In her own path, she needed to do something about herself if she really wanted to get married. She started taking anything she could lay her hands on to lose weight. She even started eating once a day and sometimes refused to eat even when the maids brought food to her against her father's wish. Her sisters had ordered the guards to stop monitoring her, saying they would make sure she ate once, although they were just looking out for their sister. She did this for a while, but instead of losing weight, she was adding more weight, making it even more difficult for her to walk. She could not go anywhere anymore. She was even carried around the palace whenever she needed to walk. It felt as if she did not do anything about her situation. She once attempted suicide, but was saved by her favorite maid. She asked for advice from her favorite maid, who told her that her mother was good at preparing mixtures for people who want to lose weight. In her words, she said, "My mother is good at preparing any mixture that can lead to weight loss. If you permit me, I will go and ask her to prepare something for you, and you will slim down in weeks." The maid said that with so much confidence. The princess was desperate at the moment and could do literally anything just to lose weight and be fit like her sisters in order to attract suitors and eventually get married. She did not have a choice but to spend money on getting the mixture, which did not work after taking it for weeks with no improvement. She abandoned it and accepted her fate. Every time the king came to see if there was any improvement, he found her fatter than before. Though he said nothing to her, she could see the disappointment written all over his face. At times, after leaving her chambers, the king would sigh with tears dripping from his eyes. He was disappointed that he could do nothing about his daughter's situation. She would sit in her room and cry, rejecting anything brought before her. The king also ordered for her to be locked inside her room and not allowed access anywhere around the palace, especially when visitors were around. The other princesses would be introduced to the visitors, but she would just sit in her room all alone. Except sometimes the maid would come and keep her company. The king felt it was the best thing to do for her to lose weight faster, even when he could not see any improvement. He kept believing that it would happen someday, or it was just the God's way of punishing him for a sin he did not know about. First, the villagers were mocking him for not having a child, but then he became an instrument of mockery for having an overweight daughter. The villagers would show her to their children when they misbehaved, and they would cry and run for their dear lives. Princess Ashanti loved dancing and listening to the beat of the melodious drums played in the village. It made her happy and she would swing her waist to the beats, forgetting everything bothering her. Her father knew she loved dancing, but he ordered everything to be taken away from her to enable her to concentrate on her weight loss journey, even at a detriment. This made the princess cry herself to sleep every day, to the extent that she even went ahead to break the mirrors at home. It was time for the New Yam Festival, and to the princess, it meant a time of dancing and listening to good rhymes coming from the sound. The festival was to last for 3 days, and the princess had prepared herself to open the window, peeping and dancing to the beats, which made her so excited. It was the first day of the festival, and her father had allowed her to leave her room as long as she did not come near the village square, and she could walk although she did not lose weight. He didn't want anyone to see her. She agreed to it, and on the first day of the festival, everything was in order. The princess would go far from the village square, where no eyes would see her, and dance to the beats of the drum until she was satisfied. Then she would go back home happily without letting anyone see her. She did it consistently, making sure that no eyes could see her, especially people from the village, so that it would not reach the king's ears. Not even her sisters knew about this. Princess Ashanti ensured that no one else knew her little secret. Although the king had seen her coming back into the palace once and asked why she left amidst his orders, she explained she was somewhere around the palace walking and jogging to lose weight. Speaking of losing weight, the king had to let her be since it was what he wanted. "Where have you been going since the start of the festival?" her most trusted maid asked her one day while she bumped into her returning from her usual routine, sweating. Princess Ashanti looked left and right. No one was in sight. She covered her maid's mouth, signaled her to follow her inside her room, then shut the door. "Don't let anyone else hear that I have been leaving the palace, so it won't reach the king's ears," she said, almost in panic. Then she smiled shyly, swinging herself from left to right. "I can't wait to hear this gist of yours. Is there someone always taking you away from the palace? If there is, it is even a good thing of joy as the kingdom is expecting it," the maid said as she noticed the princess's expression changed and she kept a sad look. "It's fine if you don't want to talk about it, my princess. Just don't stay out that late again. You know it's the festive season, and the king might come back early from the village square and find you. I don't want to lose my job, she said almost in a whisper. Princess Ashanti did not say anything for a while. Then she said, I have been far away from the outskirts of the village, dancing and making myself happy, since the gods do not want me to be happy, she said, smiling. The maid had her hand placed on her chin, ready to listen to everything the princess had to say. Oh, I have forgotten you love dancing to the rhythm of the beat. Let me pretend I am the drummer so you can dance right now. Hearing it, the princess became so excited as she started dancing while the maid mimicked the sound of the drum. Bam, bam, bam. The princess swung her waist, completely forgetting about everything that was disturbing her until the maid stopped the beat, making her realize, that was beautiful. I did not know you could mimic the ogini so well, the princess said, breathing heavily. And as she wanted to say something, her father the king knocked at the door. Open this door, Ashanti. There was complete silence as the princess rushed to open the door. The maid stood head down, placing her two hands on her back. What is that sound I am hearing? Instead of concentrating on how to lose weight and take this shame away from me, you are busy disturbing the peace of this palace. He scolded Princess Ashanti, who had just remembered her predicament as tears started dripping from her eyes. The king could not stand to see her cry, so he left, shutting the door, resulting in a bang. My princess, please stop crying. You are not bad the way you are. Any man that values you will not hesitate to marry you, her maid said as the king left, placing her hands on the princess's shoulder and trying to talk her out of her worries. What haven't I done to lose weight? Why is my father blaming me as if I am the cause of all this? And why have the gods refused to listen to my cry, at least for once, and make me slim like my sisters? She said, crying her eyes out while her maid did not have anything else to do but to console her. I believe you will find someone soon, my princess, her maid said. Then the princess suddenly remembered that she had just returned from dancing to the drum. The king had not noticed what she was wearing, as she was almost dressed like one of the dancers in the land. Thank goodness he did not see what I was wearing. I will really need to be careful next time, she said, pulling out the cloth. The next morning was not any better. It was the second day of the festival. On the second day, the princesses were to appear before the village square to get accustomed to the culture of their land, and also see the able men of the community wrestling so that they will have in mind the ones they want to get married to. The other princesses had dressed in their best attire, and Princess Ashanti followed suit. She knew about the custom and had to dress up in order to go with the king to the village square. But when she was done and came outside to tell the king, he said something that broke her into 1,000 pieces. You will only make the people mock me at the village festival, and there might be no festival today because of you. Can't you see how beautiful your sisters look? It is because of you they will not be able to pick a suitor today. Just go inside and do something about yourself, he said it with rage. The queen wanted to interfere but could not say anything as the king had the final say. Nothing could change his mind. Princess Ashanti ran to her room, tears streaming down her face. She tore off every adornment she had worn, collapsed to the floor, and blamed the gods for her. Princess Ashanti could not control her sadness as she sat on the floor crying while the king had left with her sisters for the festival. There was no one to console her at the moment, as everyone had gone for the festival along with the king. As she continued to cry, a thought came up in her mind. Why don't I just hide myself to go to the festival and stay away from the eyes of the village so that they will not see me? Then I will dance to my satisfaction, and when I get tired, I will come back home. After all, no one has ever seen me since the festival started. She hurriedly dressed up to not miss any part of the festival, especially the dancing time where she would joyously dance to the rhythm of the sound. When she was all dressed, she checked to see if the guards were inside, as the king had ordered that no one should allow her to go out. Then she ran out from the palace, using the bush path to the village square and then passing to her destination without letting anyone see her. When she got to her destination, which is a bit far from the market square, as usual, she waited for the sounds to be played. Then she started dancing to the beat, swinging her waist and dancing to the left and to the right, making sure that no one was in sight. She continued dancing to the point that the sound made from the sound got deep into her. It was as if the gods had taken full control of her at the moment, and she could not stop dancing. She danced, taking little steps away from where she was, then another step. She could not control herself anymore as she kept moving from her position bit by bit until she finally got to the village square. She had forgotten that she was not supposed to be seen by anyone. The dance had taken control of her, and she did not even notice her environment. The villagers watched, some laughing and others making fun of her as she closed her eyes, danced, and enjoyed every bit of the drum. It was a different kind of beat, and she just could not control herself anymore. The king covered his face with shame. He did not know what to say. Then he suddenly ordered that the drum should be stopped. That was when the princess could recognize herself, and she stopped dancing, opening her eyes to reality and seeing the eyes of everyone on her. "What are you doing here?" the king asked, his face completely filled with anger. "Have I not asked you to stay away from the village square?" he roared, lifting his staff. The princess, on the other hand, was astonished. She did not understand how she tended to find herself in such a situation. The last thing she could remember was that she was dancing in her private place, and there she was, seeing herself in the village square. She just had to control her tears at that point as some of the villagers started calling her pig. Some of the princes invited to grace the occasion started murmuring to themselves and asking the king why he had to embarrass them the second time. "You should lock your pig inside the house to avoid it getting in contact with humans," one of them said, keeping a serious face. He knew at that point there was nothing the king could do to him. Even the villagers agreed to what the prince said, while the princess just bowed her head, trying not to say or do anything. After all, there was nothing she could do or say to save herself at the moment. "Guards," the king called, and one of the guards rushed to hear what the king had to say. "Take her away and lock her up for flaunting my orders. She will go without food and water for 2 days and will not be allowed out of her room until the festival is over. In fact, don't let her out until she loses weight. I have tolerated enough from her," he said, pointing at the princess as the guards took the princess away. Her mother and sisters could not say anything at the moment. They just looked at the princess with pity. Some of the kings and princes invited to grace the festival started going back to their kingdoms one after the other, leaving only the king and his people who were grumbling and chanting that the king should be changed. Although the king paid deaf ears to them, he could no longer control them, and he got upset and stood up to scream, "Enough!" There was sudden silence. "Don't forget I am still the king of this kingdom," he said. Someone from the crowd said, "A king without an heir is not useful to his kingdom. We need a successor, an heir to the throne. You are growing old, my king." If it was on a normal day, such a person would have been locked up in the dark room. But the people greatly supported the man who said that, and there was nothing the king could do. The king, on the other hand, knew that everything the man said was true, and nobody would support his own decisions at the moment. He had to do anything to win the villagers' support, instead of getting them more angry. Else, they would have to request a new king to be installed. He just had to dismiss the festival, even when it was not time, and this was because of the Princess Ashanti's carelessness. Although he knew he was too harsh on her, he did not think of a better way at that moment. The festival was dismissed and the villagers went home murmuring. The king getting home was so upset. He threw down his crown, screaming at everyone in his sight. Who does she think she is to flaunt my orders without thinking twice? He screamed to himself, throwing down everything on his way before going to his room. The princess was locked up again, with no food or water for 2 days, which did her no good as nothing happened. Not even a little bit of fat was reduced. She, on the other hand, had to starve herself, hoping it would help her take away all the shame at least for once. No member of the royal household was permitted to see her throughout the entire time she was locked up in her room. Everything she needed was just provided, and the king gave an order that anyone caught visiting the princess or even taking food to her would be locked up in the dark room until the end of the festival, which was supposed to last for 4 days. No one dares to violate the rules, not even the king's beloved wife. She knew the king was not in the best mood and would not fail to punish her if she were guilty. It was as if the king was obsessed with the throne and would do anything to stay as king, even if it meant jeopardizing the happiness of his daughter. He had to journey alone this time to the neighboring village to inquire what the problem was and why his daughter had not been able to lose weight. He did it the same way he did the first time, by disguising himself and leaving the village, taking days to get to the neighboring village. He arrived late at night and was to go back just in time for the last day of the festival, which was the next day. He would do anything to get there in time before the celebration began. Getting there, he met the native doctor who was just about to leave to get some leaves from the forest. King Chipupa, you have come to inquire about the princess. I would advise you to start going. Treat her well and you will get whatever you desire. The gods are wise and things have started happening already. The native doctor said to the king as he left without turning back, making the king wonder, did I journey day and night just to listen to that? He asked himself. Confused, he was expecting an instant solution to his problem. What does treating the princess well have to do with her losing weight? I'm her father and I know what's best for her, he said as he stood for a minute, thinking about how to journey back home. He knew that even if he had to hurry back home, he would be late for the festival, which was just the next day. He did not have a choice as the festival was to decide his fate. If he was going to continue as the king or step down for someone else, because a prince was to be introduced to the people as the heir apparent to the throne and blessed by the gods of the last day of the festival. But there he was, with no one to marry his daughter, not even a drunkard. He would have just given her up to secure the throne. He just had to hurry back home and accept whatever the gods had in store for him, even if it meant giving out the throne to someone else. For the first time, he bowed his head down and cried, then continued his journey way back home. Meanwhile, the last day of the festival came, and the king was nowhere to be found. The queen, on the other hand, lied that the king was sick and would not want anyone close to him. The people accepted and started the festival without him, while the queen prayed for the king at least to come back and accept his fate. Maybe we were not meant to continue the royal lineage, she said, burying her face in her palms to cry, as the princess rushed to console her. They all dressed up and left for the festival with teary eyes. The queen instructed the guards not to let anyone into the palace so they would not notice the king is missing. She knew he would come back. Princess Ashanti was also free with a condition that she doesn't come anywhere close to the village square ever again. So the queen said. When they all had left, Princess Ashanti sneaked out using her curtain to climb down from the palace and ran to her usual spot. She wanted to enjoy just one more time of dancing before her fate was finally decided by the gods. She just could not miss it for anything. When she went to her usual spot, dancing the beats of the drums as usual, she heard a footstep. She got frightened that someone had seen her and started running away. Then a young man emerged from the bush. He was so handsome that even his eyes were like the stars, built like a warrior. "Don't stop dancing, please," he told her while he paused to find out who she was. "My name is Ofori. I am from the neighboring village. I always come here to sing whenever my heart is troubled, and all my pains will go away," he said, smiling. "I'm Princess Ashanti, the unwanted princess of this kingdom. Although this is the first time I'm seeing you here, I come here to dance away my sorrows," Princess Ashanti introduced herself. Who does not know the fat, ugly princess? He had thought silently, but she is beautiful and dances so well, he said within himself. He heard the princess was ugly, that was why he did not bother coming out as a suitor, but the princess he saw was different from the one he heard about, as she was beautiful. Then he stared at the princess for a while and said, "I love the way you dance, my princess. Would you do me the favor of dancing again? The way you swing your waist, it's just like the goddess herself is dancing." The princess could not contain her joy. At least somebody appreciated the way she danced. Since he was her only audience, there was no way she could say no to him. She started dancing as he played his flute, matching the beat of the sound. The princess got carried away again. Princess Ashanti continued dancing, and Ofori allowed her to dance as her expression showed she was happy. Ofori stopped playing the flute and simply stood there, admiring the way the princess moved perfectly in sync with the drum's beat. He was mesmerized as he had never seen a maiden dance like that before. The fact that she could dance so well, despite her body size, was captivating to watch. He couldn't take his eyes off her. She stopped dancing when she noticed he was entranced by her movements. He was still staring at her when she snapped her fingers, causing him to startle, then regain consciousness. "My princess, you dance beautifully," he said, his face beaming with a smile as she also smiled shyly. No one had complimented her that way before. Everyone else just saw her as a fat, shapeless creature. It was time to leave as the festival was coming to an end, and she needed to rush home before everyone else. She noticed the drum beat slowing down, signaling that everyone would soon depart. "Thank you so much for making me happy. I need to go home now," she said. Ofori's expression turned sad. He was enjoying her company, unaware of her restrictions. Before he could comprehend it all, the princess had vanished, hurrying home to avoid further restrictions on the last day. She followed the familiar bush track, running as fast as her legs could carry her, finally arriving at the palace. The guards were too preoccupied to notice as she slipped in, removing her shoes and tiptoeing to avoid making any noise. Finally in her room, she climbed onto the bed, letting out a sigh of relief and smiling intermittently as she thought about the kind of words the young man had spoken to her. It had been declared in the village square that a new king would be installed in a week's time. The king attended the festival, and as the people saw him walking as if he were perfectly fine, they questioned him. "My king, you don't look sick," one of the villagers said. He turned to look at his wife, who signaled that she had lied on his behalf. He tried to cover up by saying, "Oh, praise the gods. As the ogini played, I stood up and danced to it, and I felt instant healing. I have to come here and celebrate with you." Of course, he knew nobody believed the lie, but as he was still their king, there was nothing they could do about it. Then the kingmaker interrupted, saying, "Igwe, it is good that you are here. We were discussing the future of this kingdom. Since your wife cannot produce an heir and nobody wants to marry the princesses, we would like you to step down in a week's time, and the staff of royalty will be passed on to another family." This news hit the king like a shock. Although he anticipated it, he strongly believed in the words of the native doctor that the gods were in control of everything. "He lied to me," the king murmured, saying nothing to his people as he silently went and sat on his throne. Contemplating how to hand over the kingship, a legacy passed down from his ancestors to his lineage. He was completely disappointed by how everything had turned out. Returning to the ongoing festival, he watched the maidens dancing and the young men engaging in a sword fight. As the festival concluded, the king addressed his people, although with a heavy heart. The queen could see tears welling up in his eyes and how hard he was trying to control them. He was a king and was never expected to cry. Then they all dispersed to their various houses, with the king going back to the palace with his family. Straight to his room, he ordered the gates to be locked and no one was allowed to visit him or make any complaints. After all, he was no longer going to be their king. The palace doors were closed the first day, making life more difficult for the princess as she could not go back to see Ofori. She had been having several dreams about him that she could not disclose to anybody, not even her trusted maid. She had to keep everything to herself, fantasizing about him and imagining a world with him, free from her troubles. Everyone in the palace had to completely ignore one another, thinking about possible ways to stop the problem they were facing. Princess Ashanti was lost in her own world, and the thought of not seeing Ofori had completely destabilized her. She had to find a way to see him again. She didn't care about the king's orders at the time. The fact that he didn't care about her and saw her as the cause of his problems didn't stop her. It was another day of silence in the royal house. Princess Ashanti didn't care about anything other than Ofori. She wondered if he still came to the usual spot in search of her. She didn't understand if he had any other feelings for her besides his love for the way she danced. The only way she could find out was by meeting him face to face, and she needed to make that happen. The fact that her father was no longer going to be the king didn't bother her anymore. As long as she could still visit Ofori, who would play the flute for her to dance, she wished she wasn't even the first daughter. She was tired of hiding from the whole village when she didn't create herself that way. Although disobeying the king's orders led to serious punishment, she was sad about the ban imposed by the king when it was time to go and see her love. She knew what to do about the whole situation because she kept having dreams about him calling out to her. With a racing heart, she felt his presence in her thoughts, the hope that he too longed for her. What if I don't find him there waiting for me? I don't even know the village he is from, she whispered to herself. The uncertainty garnered at her, urging her to seek him out. I just need to find him somehow. I am just losing it, she declared, her voice echoing in the quiet room. Standing up, she took a deep breath, her resolve firm as she slowly stepped out of her chamber. With a determined look on her face, she was set on a mission to locate him, to solve the mystery that connected their hearts. Princess Ashanti raced out of the gate the moment it was opened after pleading with the gods to be rewarded handsomely if he allowed her to go out. Despite the king's warning, the guards took a risk by opening the gate. It was a day without dancing for the princess, and she was unhappy unless she saw Ofori. Stepping out of the road, she looked left and right to ensure no one was following her. Even if Ofori agrees to marry me, will my father approve? She asked, knowing the king preferred a prince for his daughter, making it challenging to convince him otherwise. Perhaps the rule would not apply in her case since the king was desperate at the moment. She knew he would be willing to accept any suitor as long as he retained his throne. Unfortunately, upon arrival, she couldn't find Ofori. This really crushed her hopes. Was he not thinking of me as I thought of him? She questioned almost in tears, wondering if the gods were playing tricks on her. Disheartened, she sat there, hoping Ofori would show up and express his feelings. She didn't care about the consequences of her absence from the palace, thinking, what could be worse than what he has already done? There was nothing new he could do to her at that point. Sitting there, she had an idea to lift her spirits since Ofori didn't show up. Why don't I just dance and make myself happy as I usually do? She thought aloud. It was a great idea. Princess Ashanti started dancing to the invisible beats of the drum, imagining the drums being played. She danced alone, lost in her own world, feeling good as she moved to the rhythm. Closing her eyes, she let the music in her mind guide her movements, picturing her lover and finding happiness in the dance. As she continued, she heard the flute playing, but she was so engrossed in her own dance that she initially ignored it, thinking it was part of her imagination. It was not until the sound drew closer that she stopped and turned, only to find Ofori playing the flute. Overwhelmed, she rushed to hug him, unsure of her actions in the moment. She then hesitated, realizing the implications of her actions as a princess and fearing rejection. With a serious expression, she asked him, "What are you doing here?" Ofori, initially silent, smiled, leaving her wondering if he was at a loss for words. Despite her heart racing like she had just finished running, she managed a faint smile, hoping he would speak. When he finally expressed his admiration for her dancing and asked her to dance again, her heart skipped a beat. "I came here to see you," he said. Blushing and unable to meet his gaze directly, she shyly inquired, "See me? Why?" Her emotions in a whirlwind, she waited for his response, not wanting to ruin the moment they shared. "Can you dance for me one more time?" he asked, and she knew she didn't have a choice at that moment because she was willing to do anything for Ofori, even if she had not expressed it to him directly. In this kingdom, a man proposes first, she thought deeply. Ofori, not a prince, expressed his concerns about seeking her hand in marriage and his desire for her to dance for him every day. This was precisely what the princess longed to hear. She had contemplated asking her father, the king, to open the gates, believing all their problems would vanish with the suitor. However, she pondered whether her father would accept a poor man like Ofori, whom she viewed as just a farmer from the neighboring community, lacking priestly status. "I will come with my people in the next 2 market days to see the king and ask for your hand in marriage," Ofori declared confidently. Despite his appearance indicating poverty, the princess questioned if the king would approve. She noted the king's disregard for suitors' backgrounds, as he was more concerned with maintaining his throne. Excited by the news, she planned to disclose everything to the king as soon as possible. "After all, he will retain his throne while I get married to the one I love," she said to herself. Unknown to her, the gods had different plans in store, a revelation she would uncover in due time. As Ofori finished speaking, he escorted her halfway to the palace along the bush track to avoid the villagers seeing them. Since he was not prepared to marry her at the moment, she planned with the guards to open the gate upon her return, and as planned, he did so. Rushing back to her room, she opened the door and went straight to bed. Princess Ashanti thought about how she would tell her father that someone was finally ready to marry her, regardless of her body size. With a smile on her face and deep in thought, she fell fast asleep. The princess could no longer keep everything to herself. When she got up, she rushed to her father's chambers. Although the king had asked not to be disturbed, she felt the news would uplift his spirit. She had to tell him so they could start making preparations. If Ofori arrived, she asked herself, what if he does not come back? That was just a silly thought, trying to talk her out of her happiness. She ignored it and knocked at the king's chamber. "Come in," he said, as she bowed her head before the king, who was already upset at the sight of her. He did not say anything. She then said, "Someone is coming to ask for my hand in marriage." The king looked confused as he glanced at her from head to toe. He could not believe it and remained silent, trying to understand the situation. Then he asked, "Is he a prince?" This story is about to get even more interesting. Therefore, I really need to know that you are enjoying the story. So, say something in the comment section. Or you can comment whatever it is that you like. I really want to see that you guys are enjoying the story for me to be motivated to post the next story. So please, first of all, subscribe. Secondly, please make sure to like the video. And thirdly, please write a comment, write anything. So, first of all, tell me how interesting the story is and what you've actually learned. "No, he is not a prince," Princess Ashanti responded. She could not believe her ears. Why would the king be asking that kind of question? Especially when she knew he was desperate and even mentioned giving her away to a drunkard. What is the king even planning? He didn't say anything more to her. He simply used his hands to dismiss her as she left for her room. Trying to wrap her head around everything that was happening and the king's sudden change of mind, she could tell that something was amiss, but she just didn't know what was. Who was she to question the king? A man who had once thrown his own wife into a cage for 2 days just for disobeying him. Everyone was scared of him. She had to do her best to convince him, or else she wouldn't be able to marry Ofori, her beloved husband. What was so special about marrying a prince anyway? It was like marrying just anyone. She had her plans to run away with him if the king took too long to accept everything. After all, he was the only one who truly appreciated and loved her, despite her being fat. She wasn't going to miss the opportunity because no one else would want her. The time was drawing near for the king to be dethroned, yet he didn't seem bothered in the slightest. It seemed like he had accepted his fate, but the great lion doesn't give up easily. It was unlike him. Could he be planning something no one knew about, not even his wife, the queen? She was just there. The queen didn't bother to tell her anything. She was merely the queen. Princess Ashanti, on the other hand, continues to sneak off to see her lover, who would play the flute for her to dance, and together they would dream forever. Until one fateful day, when she returned to find the king at the gate, she wondered how he got there. "Where have you been?" he asked. "I have heard about the young man you have been going to meet." She glanced at the palace, and the guard who was always opening the gate for her was lying on the ground, face down. Someone might have related everything to the king. "You are the cause of everything going on in this kingdom, and even with it all, you could not attract a prince but a farmer who will have nothing to offer to this kingdom." The king yelled, hitting his staff on the floor. "Take the princess and lock her up in the cage alongside this guard," the king ordered. It was just so confusing, and it seemed the king had gone mad because he obviously did not know what he was doing. Princess Ashanti was locked up for 2 more days. Ofori kept coming to find her in their usual spot, but he did not find her. He would come and sit for hours playing the flute with the hope that she would show up, but it did not happen. Although the sound from the flute still played in her ears whenever she fell asleep, she could hear him call, "Ashanti," in a faint voice. But when she wakes, she will realize she is in a cage guided by the guards. The king also did not leave his room or talk to anyone. He withdrew himself from everything, speaking to himself that at times his wife will run away once she enters his court. The palace was extremely silent, and days were counted for him to finally vacate the throne for another family. That could have been the reason he was acting like someone who has lost his senses. He knew he would achieve nothing by locking his own daughter up for no reason. Was it because she could not attract a prince, or was it due to pure hatred he had for her? This time, the king had gone to see her in the cage where he locked her, keeping a straight face. But what he saw shocked him. For the first time, the princess had reduced a bit. He had to look again, although he did not cause a scene because the princess herself did not know anything. Although the weight loss was not really obvious, the king went his way without saying anything to anyone. He did not even allow anyone close to the princess. She was on her own in the cage. He felt letting anyone know would distract the process. He wanted to leave her and come back to see more improvement. In that way, she would get married to a prince and leave the farmer she had finally fallen in love with. To him, such a man does not deserve his daughter. It was a good sign that she was losing a bit of weight. If she loses it completely, a better man will find her, a rich prince from whom he will gain fortunes while he retains his position as the king. The princess, on the other hand, could not stop thinking about Ofori. She would rather die than agree to marry any prince who would not value her. The king came back to see how the princess had reduced weight. And again, to his surprise, she was fatter than before. It was the gods playing tricks on him and his selfishness. When he looked at her, he was more disappointed. He asked the gods to release her. It was just 2 days to his dethronement, and he knew there was nothing else he could do as he valued his throne. He ordered, "Open the gate." When the gate was opened, he said to the weak princess, "I have accepted your marriage to the farmer. Go and tell him to bring his people in 2 days, and I will bless your marriage." The princess did not say anything to him. She fell face down due to tiredness. The guards had to rush her to her room and lay her on the bed. The king did not care in the slightest. He was just concerned about his kingdom. To him, even if she does not marry a prince, he has 2 pretty daughters who will make him proud. All he needed to do was marry her off. She was useless to him because she was fat and unuseful. He could not wait for the young man to come with his people and take her away so that he can organize a festival where his other 2 daughters will pick a rich prince for themselves. He smiled as he thought about it. It was still a win for him. Princess Ashanti rushed out to inform her lover of the new development. At least she wouldn't come back and be punished by the king. It was as if they both were thinking alike because Ofori arrived just before she did. She could no longer hold herself. "My father has given me his consent to our marriage, and he has asked me to inform you to bring your people in 2 days' time," she said happily. As Ofori's face lit up, he was expecting the news. He knew the king did not have a choice either, and he, on the other hand, could not wait to get married to the princess. He had grown to love her by the day, but had felt to let her know to be seen as a weakling. For a strong man does not profess too much love. They did not talk much as they both sat, fantasizing about their life together, as the lovers could not wait to get married. It was just the happiest day in the princess's life. It was just like a dream that a princess that no one wanted was finally getting married. At least her sisters would get married too and stop blaming her for being the reason they were not married. And she would have someone to defend her any time the king said those mean words to her. Her problems were indeed coming to an end. "Let me go before the king starts looking for me. You know how he is." He just asked me to relate the information to you, Ashanti said shyly as she got up to leave. Can I escort you halfway to your palace, but this time as your soon-to-be husband? He asked, also smiling, as they both could not look at one another in the face. She accepted for him to escort her, and they both strode, this time using the village square where all eyes could see them. There was nothing to be scared of anymore. At least the king had approved of their union, so he would not punish her for going out to meet him. They held hands as they walked and laughed, and anyone that passed could not stop staring. Halfway to the palace, he said, "My princess, I need to leave now. Just go in and get yourself prepared because in 2 days you will be all mine. I will be so excited that I will sleep with my eyes open until the time I come with my people to take you away." He said this as she entered the gate and he went back to his village. The princess was happy as she entered the palace. It was the first time the king did not say anything mean to her. He just looked at her. She had never expected such a day to come. Perhaps he had accepted that she was the only one who could help him retain the throne, even if he didn't admit it. He simply looked at her as she bowed and greeted him. Then she went straight to her room. In just 2 days, she would have her freedom where no one in the village would call her names or make her feel bad. To her, the only words that would matter would be those of her husband, who would never say hurtful things to her. The king did not matter to her, not even in the slightest. The first day came and all arrangements were made in the palace for the coronation and the princess's marriage to her lover. Princess Ashanti couldn't help but marvel at how things had changed in such a short time, and she would be married after other men found her unworthy. In the afternoon, one of the guards came in breathing heavily. Allowed into the gate, he fell before the king, shivering and unable to speak. When he tried, he stammered. "What is it? Speak," the king commanded. Then he finally spoke. "My king, there is calamity in the land. There is an unknown ailment plaguing the land, and still people have been infected already. I witnessed the scene, although the cause has not been found. The native doctor asked me to run to the palace and inform you that no one should be allowed out of the palace until the cause has been disclosed and the cure is known," he said as the king patted his back and went out of the palace. The king had to call an emergency meeting in which the town crier announced the meeting and its urgency to the people. They all came out to listen to what the king had to say. "My people," he started as he stretched his legs after getting up from the chair he sat. "An unknown ailment has plagued our land, and until the cause is found, nobody is allowed to leave his or her house to anywhere, not even to the farm. The people that have been affected should be kept in a separate room and separated from the rest of you. I repeat, don't leave your house to anywhere," he said, looking at the princess. He knew she was fond of leaving the palace to go and see her lover. Even when the king had announced at the village square, he still caught her in the palace and warned her, "Don't go out there to anywhere until the cause of the ailment has been found. You don't know if it's deadly." The princess just nodded as he spoke. She did not care about whatever he said, and to her, he did not care whether she was alive or not. It was not in his place to look after her, after she was just a thing used to secure the throne. Even if anything happens to her, he might marry off one of these princesses to a rich prince and gain fortunes out of it. It was of no use advising her. Then it dawned on the princess that she had to inform Ofori, her lover, to come in 2 days' time with his people to see the king and carry on with the marital rites. He might not have heard what was happening in their community. She had to find a way to say everything to him, even if it meant leaving the palace. What the king said did not matter to her. Towards evening, Princess Ashanti sat inside her room, thinking about how she would see Ofori and always talk to him about the plague. What if he comes into this kingdom and contracts it from somewhere? She asked herself, trying to figure out what to do since she could not leave the palace. Just then, Princess Mary, the second child of the king and the most beautiful, approached Princess Ashanti in her room. She had always been complaining about her sister being the reason she couldn't get married, and to her, her beauty was fading, which made her hate her sister even more. She came with thick sympathy, knocking at the door. Princess Ashanti asked her to come in and was extremely shocked because since the whole incident about marriage started, both her and her sisters had refused to talk to her. They avoided her as if she were some kind of abomination. It did not bother her much, although at times she was always sad. "This one you come to my chambers. I hope I did not do anything wrong to you," Princess Ashanti asked inquisitively as her sister just smiled and sat on the bed. "I came here to console you. I know tomorrow would have been the day you finally got married to your lover, but it will not work anymore. What are you going to do about it?" Even with the way she spoke, it was obvious she did not care about her sister, even in the slightest. Princess Ashanti closely examined her and could see the princess in her eyes. She adjusted herself on the bed and then said, "Nothing can be done now. I will wait for him until after the cause of the ailment has been found, and then we can proceed with the arrangements." Her sister laughed at her, clapping her hands. She said, "You are naive. Do you seriously think he will be waiting for you till then? Or do you think the cure for the ailment will be discovered soon? Why don't you go look for him to hasten things?" The princess pondered her sister's words for a moment. It was clear she wanted her to leave the palace and contract the ailment. As Princess Mary prepared to leave, she advised, "Think about it and take action now. If he doesn't come, no one else will. You know no man in this kingdom or any other kingdom finds you appealing to the eyes." With an evil laugh, she left Princess Ashanti. Ashanti felt no need to dwell on anything. She knew her sister didn't care about her and might even wish her harm. She focused on thoughts of Ofori. Days without his presence or compliments left her feeling hopeless. Princess Mary, however, learned from gossip about the young man's handsomeness and was upset at the idea of her sister marrying him. She believed it would be better for her sister to marry a drunk. Forgetting about the throne, all she wanted was revenge on her sister for delaying her own marriage and potentially marrying a better man. She decided to go to the spot where her sister and Ofori usually met, intending to persuade him from marrying Princess Ashanti, whom she deemed unfit for him. "If I don't encounter anyone on my way, the ailment will not reach me. I will be careful. When I reveal my beauty to him, he will forget about Ashanti. As for that ugly fat sister of mine, I will make sure I deal with her for delaying me from getting married," she said as she stormed out of the palace. She had gathered information about the usual spots where Ofori and Princess Ashanti usually met. She knew he would come looking for the princess somehow. Unfortunately, when she got there, she could not see Ofori, which made her very disappointed. "Did I really have to risk coming out here and not finding him?" she asked herself as she sat down and meditated within herself about anything else she could do. She had a second plan. Killing Princess Ashanti would make the king allow her to pick a groom for herself, and she would choose Ofori. She sat there, imagining how good they would both look together, and got lost in her imagination. One of the infected persons ran and touched her. "My princess, please save me. I am dying," he said. As he drops to the floor, seems the ailment had tormented him for long. Before she could realize and run away, the man had already touched her. She opened her mouth in awe as she saw the man drop to the floor. She was scared and ran back to the palace. When she knocked at the gate, the king, who was waiting for her after hearing she had gone missing, responded, "Did I not ask you to stay inside the palace? I know you have contacted the disease. I don't care if I lose a stubborn child, but you will have to remain outside the gate with the other infected persons until the cure has been found." The king said, even though his heart was weak when he spoke. He had heard the ailment was deadly, and he did not want her to infect other members of his household. He went into his chambers to cry, for she was his most beloved, and there was nothing he could do. In the early hours of the morning, 4 people had dropped dead from the ailment, and he mourned his daughter because he knew she would be gone too, just like the rest. He himself feared death. The king hid the whereabouts of the princess from his wife. It was only known to him. Princess Ashanti also could not stop thinking. Days turned to weeks, which in turn became months. The king was sleeping in his chambers, and Princess Ashanti, who was always crying herself to sleep when she thought about Ofori, was asleep as usual. Then there was a bang at the gate, loud enough to wake any living being. Curiosity arose as everyone ran out to find out the source of the noise. As everyone rushed out, the native doctor commanded, "Open the gate," as he was on the other side of the gate with the villagers. The 2 princesses and the queen stood in awe, not understanding what was going on. "Go to your chambers. What is happening here is not your business, woman," the king said as the 3 women rushed to their rooms, leaving only the king outside. The crowd was too much, and the king had a second thought that it could be all the people that contracted the ailment, including the native doctor. But then he could recall that the people that contracted the ailments were weak and falling to the ground. But the people outside the gate had been chanting for a while. "What is going on here?" the king asked. He had to be convinced he was not going to contract the ailment when the gate was opened, and he saw the native doctor with other villagers all hailing and screaming at the top of their voices. "Let us in, let us in. You warned us not to open the gate, and you are asking us to open it. I hope all is well," the king asked as he was scared, but he gave a fierce expression that no one could notice. "My king, don't be a coward. Open the gate. I come in peace," the native doctor said. The king, without having a second thought, ordered the guards to open the gate for fear of being called a coward. Although he was still afraid, he needed to act strong and prepared for anything. The native doctor, together with the villagers who were dancing and screaming at the top of their voices, entered the palace. The people stopped chanting and everywhere became silent. Then the native doctor started performing some incantations and uttering words that could barely be heard. "Where is the princess?" he asked. The king was confused for a minute, trying to understand what was going on. "Which of the princesses?" he asked, as there were only 2, since he did not know the whereabouts of Princess Mary, if she was still alive or not. "Princess Ashanti," the native doctor said, as the king's expression changed. He was confused about why the native doctor would be asking about a princess nobody wanted to talk about due to her body size, or if she had done something else to anger the people, he pondered. While still seeking answers, the native doctor continued, "The great Agu, stop unnecessary thinking. We need to bring the princess out for an apology. The gods revealed to me that after days of fasting, that we must gather the people, kneel before the princess and apologize for our wrongs. Everyone is equal, regardless of size. Please, my king, we must see the princess for the ailments to leave." The king, taken aback, never expected the princess to hold such importance. Though skeptical, he believed the native doctor, the eyes and ears of the gods. Despite this, his pride clouded his judgment. Why apologize to a mere princess, he pondered. With a firm stance, he dismissed the idea, stating, "Eyes of the gods, I trust you, but the princess is insignificant. There is no need apologizing to her. You may have consulted the gods wrongly. It cannot be her." Stampeding his feet, he commanded, "Guards, send them out and lock the gate," he commanded. "When you come back with a better condition, I will let you in. Go back and consult the gods," he said to the native doctor. The guards followed the king's order and removed the people and the native doctor from the palace without physical contact as instructed by the king. Before leaving, the native doctor warned the king, My king, I am warning you that the gods will not show mercy on you or the people of this kingdom if we do not carry out what we are asked to do. People will keep dying and you will die also." The king was shocked by these words. It felt like an arrow had been thrown into his heart. Now, pausing for a moment before regaining his composure and storming angrily to his chambers. Despite the queen's concern, he ignored her, giving her a stern look that sent her back to her chambers. In his room, the king pondered the native doctor's words about his death. He grappled with the fate of the villagers, realizing his selfishness. Apologizing to Ashanti felt like an insult, yet he understood the gods might demand it. He resolved not to apologize, convinced the gods would spare him, and willing to bow down to a princess who had only brought shame to him. He held resentment towards Ashanti, feeling the queen's birthing of her was a burden. "If I had known the good-for-nothing child would bring so much trouble to me, I would have just ended her life when she was still a baby," he said angrily, cursing the day the princess was born. Then he simply shrugged his shoulders. "Over my dead body, I will not allow such an abomination of apologizing to a little child. The gods should do their worst. I am ready for the worst," he declared as he rose and made his way to Princess Ashanti's chambers. His eyes had turned red, and he was no longer in control of his emotions. He had reached his limit with her. "What are you, and why are you a threat to me?" the queen questioned Princess Ashanti after locating her chamber. He used his hands to push her door with anger, and it opened, leaving the princess startled. As she got up from her bed and stood still, shivering, the king walked in with a knife. No one knew where he got it from. He held it tight in his hands, his eyebrows raised. He had completely turned into a monster without even knowing it. "Today is the day I will end your life in this palace. You have caused me so much pains and humiliation that I cannot even face my people." He raised the knife to stab the princess, and she rushed out of her chambers, screaming at the top of her voice. Her screams attracted both her mother, her sister, and the guards, who came out to see the king chasing the princess with a knife. "The king has finally gone mad. We need to lock him up until he regains consciousness," one of the guards said, as the king did not stop chasing the princess until everyone came out of their chambers, including the maids. They held the king together, and the knife fell from his hands. The queen, for the first time, rushed to hold her daughter, who was shivering with fear, unable to do anything. As the king was taken away and locked up by the guards, she said, "I am sorry, my daughter. I have not been able to defend you before your father. I have been scared of what he will do to me, but I will not watch him hurt you ever again. He does not even deserve to be a king." Princess Ashanti followed her mother to her chambers and could not sleep throughout the night, as she kept dreaming about her father trying to stab her with a knife, making her scream and wake up. She was paranoid about everything around her. The next morning was a different day, as the king was still locked up in a cage. No one was bothered about it. He was to be locked up until the day a new king was installed. By right, he was still the king, but it was risky releasing him because no one knew what he had in mind to do. On the other hand, Princess Ashanti could not get over the trauma that the king left her with, which made her shiver if anybody touched her, including her own mother. At this point, she also cried about the fact that Ofari did not come back for her like he promised. Although the plague was not over, he would have found a way to talk to her, at least she thought. She was sick of staying indoors and being treated like she was not human. She had wished for the plague to be over so that she could go back dancing away from her sorrows, even if Ofari did not come back. She just spent her days praying for the plague to go away without even knowing she was the cause of the plague, since the king did not say it directly to her. The villagers got tired of the deaths caused by the strange ailment, which had increased in the span of days, and the king could not do anything about it. To them, they had a simple task, which was to apologize to the princess, and everything would go back to normal. The native doctor suggested, why don't we take the bodies of the people who are dead because of the strange ailment to the palace, so that the king will see the bodies of our mothers, fathers, sisters, sons, and daughters. The people hailed him as he continued, we will not allow him to anger the gods even more by stopping us from apologizing to the princess. We will all head to the palace and protest. If we all die, we die, he said, as they wrapped the dead bodies and carried them on their shoulders, shielding themselves in order to avoid physical contacts. They took it to the palace as they kept chanting, we want the princess. The noise from the people was loud enough for anyone in the palace to hear, as everyone ran out of their chambers to see what was happening at the gate as they drew nearer yet again. The guards went too, but they refused to release the king, who was hitting the gate with his hands and cursing them. I greet you, all people of this great kingdom, the queen said as the people got to the gate. Where is that weakling that calls himself the king? He is sleeping peacefully in his house while ours are on fire. Our families are dropping dead every day, yet he denied us the right to carry out our assignments. Release the princess to us, that we may touch her feet and apologize to her, and this ailment will be taken away from us, the chief priest said. The queen could not say anything else to them. She was confused about the whole situation, as the king did not say anything to her. Then she asked, which of the princesses do you seek that I may release her to you? The villagers echoed at the same time, release Princess Ashanti to us. The princess had to step out by herself, although she was scared that they might touch her and infect her, but she had to trust the gods. Open the gate, let my people touch me, if it is what they believe. The princess finally commanded as her courage grew stronger, and immediately the gate was opened. The villagers rushed in all at the same time as they went down on their knees to apologize to her. Please tell the gods to spare us. We are sorry for humiliations and for mocking what was created by the gods. Please help us, they said. The princess did not know what to say to them. She was not the gods and could not heal anyone. She simply said, I have forgiven you all. The native doctor looked up into the sky and said, the gods have accepted our pleas. The people chanted happily, oh, hail the princess, may your days be long. They carried the dead bodies to bury them and waited for the time the ailment would completely leave. The dead bodies were buried, and the king was still locked up in the cage by his guards. Everybody knew about it and supported the guards. Although the princess had protested several times that he should be released, everyone paid deaf ears to her. The king cannot be released. Don't forget he tries to kill you, and you are asking for such a person to be released, they scolded her. To them, she was just too good because they would ask that the king be thrown out of the palace if it happens to them. The princess was not happy about the fact that the king was locked up in a cage. She took it upon herself to find a way for the king to be released. She felt whatever the king did was just because he was upset with her and wouldn't deliberately try to kill her. She waited for the guards to fall asleep, then retrieved the key from one of their pockets and opened the door for the king to be out. The king, after he was out, did not say anything to her. He just looked at her and went straight to his chambers. He was completely tired and upset with the guards that locked him up. He was still the king, but that meant betrayal. The king did not say anything to anyone at all. Going to his chambers, no one knew he was released except Princess Ashanti. The queen was in his chambers, and when she saw him, she was extremely shocked. She had supported the fact that he was locked up due to the time he had humiliated the princess, although she felt pity for him at the same time. The queen ran out when she spotted the king coming from his chambers. Why are you running away from me? Do you think I will hurt you? He asked. Throughout our years of being married, I have not done that. You think I will do it now? He said to her as she had already reached for the door. He had to question the gods about why his own wife was running away from him due to a little mistake he made. He was just carried away by his anger. That evening, the king was not served his usual breakfast as king. Everyone had even forgotten about him as a king and moved on. No one knew he was released except his wife and Princess Ashanti. Even when the king had refused to thank her for releasing him from there, he felt as if she did not. Another person would have done that, and he would not even apologize to her. The next morning, the king dressed up and wore his royal attire, carrying his offal, signifying he was still the king and capable of commanding respect. He saw the faces of the guards that locked him up, and it was about time they paid for what they did. He commanded the guards to lock them up too, and in their cases, they were to go without food for a week. It was done just like he commanded. He asked for the gates to be fully opened. At least the plague had gone. Even when he did not join in apologizing to the princess, he just ignored her. Whenever she tried speaking to him, he would ignore her. It was not as if he did not want to say anything to her, but he would lose his pride to a little girl, and he did not want that. When the gate was finally opened, the native doctor visited again and informed the king that in 3 days' time, the kingship would move to another family. The king continued in his thoughts about losing the throne. Princess Ashanti finally went out of the gate, but not without asking questions about her sister, Princess Mary. Unfortunately, one of the villagers announced that the ailment caught up with her and ended her life. She refused to disclose it to anyone as she cried after her sister's demise. She wouldn't have left the palace. I knew she did not like me, but there was no need trying to eliminate me, Princess Ashanti thought, as she felt extremely sad about what happens to her sister. She knew her father might not even break down when he hears the news, but there was nothing they could do. She pitied the queen more. She had seen a lot in the hands of the king. Princess Ashanti had to go back to the very place she met Ofori with the hope that he would appear and apologize for keeping her waiting, but he did not come the first day. She just imagined the beat of the drums on her head and danced to it like she usually does. The second day also came, and still he did not come looking for the princess. The third day was the day the king was to be dethroned, and everyone had waited patiently. Even the leaves in the bushes were no longer flapping, but silently waiting for a new king to be installed. The arrangements were made, and this time it was as if the gods had made up their minds, and nothing else could be done than the king to step down. The palace was filled with silence that anything happening outside could be heard. The queen was already tired of being a queen, especially to a king that did not care about anything else but himself. And she had already packed up and was eager to become a normal person. Princess Ashanti did not bother much. All she wanted was just to meet up with Ofori, even if it was once. She felt he might not know the plague was over. The day was specially made by the gods. The ceremony for the king's dethronement started, and the king had humbly accepted his fate. It was the first time the villagers had seen the king in such a calm state, and he was already welling up tears in his eyes, waiting for the right time to let it out. At least he was human and needed to act like one. The native doctor started by taking off the king's beards, and then the offer, and then the crown followed. The people watched with so much happiness. When it was time for the crown to be taken off, the native doctor had to take his time because once the crown was removed, the king would not wear it anymore. He began some incantations, and then, after reciting the last words, the native doctor proceeded to take off the king's crown. As he lifted his hands to remove it, someone interrupted the crowd. "Hold on," he said. Everyone turned to find out who it was as they gave the person space to come out of the crowd. "We have a coronation to plan, and the king's crown is still needed for a prince to be crowned," he said as he revealed himself. It was Ofori, all dressed like a prince, making Princess Ashanti break protocols of not leaving the royal seat as she rushed to hug him with tears in her eyes. "Where have you been?" she asked. She did not even notice his royal apparel. After giving him a hug, her face lightened up with smiles. Princess Ashanti noticed the royal apparel on Ofori and quickly released herself from his grip. A lot of thoughts were running through her mind that she did not know what to say. Then she finally said, "Why are you dressed like a prince? You have never worn this outfit before. Is there something you are not telling me?" Her head was very heavy and she just needed an explanation at the moment. Why would he lie to her? If he was really lying, she asked. "My princess, I can explain. It means you lied to me. You know what? I don't want to talk to you from now on." She ran out of the village square with tears in her eyes. Everyone watched her and she was out of sight. She was so disappointed with Ofori. Did he not see her fit to just tell her the truth? Or did he feel she did not deserve it? Everyone understood her at the moment and let her be. The princess went to the usual place she used to see Ofori to cry. She did not expect him to follow her. She just wanted to be on her own. "My king, let's give the princess time to process whatever is going on. We know it is not easy. We will fix a date for the coronation whenever she is ready," the native doctor said. The king did not care. They could take all the time if they wanted, as far as he was still king. Ofori just smiled. He knew how to calm her down. He had to bow before the king, then left to find his lover. The king himself was excited that he would retain his throne, even when he was not grateful to the person that made it happen. Ofori knew where to find the princess. He hurriedly went to their meeting point and found the princess, who had already soaked her eyes with tears. She was facing the bush, lost in thought, and her expression said it all. She was disappointed. He stood there for minutes without saying anything to her at first, wanting her to express everything on her mind, then be calm before speaking to her. He knew he had hurt her deeply, but he felt it was not his fault. "My princess, I know a future king isn't expected to kneel for his queen, but can I break protocols for you?" There was a moment of silence before he knelt before the princess, who couldn't bear to watch. "Please, don't kneel before me. I don't deserve it," she said, turning away. She had made up her mind to stay angry with him. "My princess, I am sorry. I did not mean to hurt you this way. Let me start by telling the truth. I am Prince Ofori from the village of Umuagu. I was to be crowned prince the day I visited your village, but I needed a bride. None of the maidens in my kingdom were appealing to me, so I came to your village, especially when I heard about the festival. It was a great opportunity to find a bride. I would stay here and watch the maidens, but I still couldn't find anyone. I kept going back to my kingdom, disappointed. I had also promised my father, the king, that I will find a bride before the festival is over, even when I did not know how. I had heard about the king's fat and ugly daughter, but I hadn't met her until the first day I saw you. It felt like it was destined by the gods. I lost my sleep thinking about you." The princess was still upset with him, even after he explained himself. She wanted to know something. "Why didn't you tell me you were a prince at first? Why did you choose to lie?" she asked with a pained look, feeling stressed out. "If I had come like a prince, I wouldn't have found the right maiden to marry. In your case, you might have thought I liked you out of pity since I was a prince," he said, shaking his head, unsure of how to convince her. "I am sorry, my princess. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you. You've been through enough and I never wanted to add to your troubles. I promise that was the first and last time I lied to you. I just need your permission to bring my people so that your dowry can be paid. I don't want to stay away from you anymore," he said, his sincerity evident in his eyes, even though she found it hard to admit. She got up from where she was sitting, looked at him and then said, "I am going back to the palace. I will think about forgiving you. I don't even care about saving my father's throne anymore because he doesn't even appreciate my effort. Maybe we could just be ordinary villagers and the crown pass to another family. I don't know." She couldn't say more and left Ofori to his fate, even though deep down she missed him and couldn't wait to get married to him. She had to show him she was really hurt by what he did. She turned at intervals and their eyes met. Then she finally left for the palace. When she entered, the king was just there waiting for her. As he saw her for the first time, he called her, "My daughter." The princess could not believe her ears. She had to confirm he was actually the one calling her that. One more episode to go. Please type in the comment section. Continue. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.